Welcome into the Dore Report. It is episode 161. It is May 4th, 2022. We are powered by the great folks at Alaco Fine Wood Floors. They're a family-owned and operated for more than 2 decades. Alaco Fine Wood Floors is Nashville and Middle Tennessee's choice for premium quality hardwood floors. For more information, log on to their website at alacofinewoodfloors.com. Well, we've got, of course, it's been about a week since we last recorded, and of course, not a ton has happened, but we've got a lot of baseball to talk about. We've got some men's basketball news to talk about, a promotion for Mr. Andy Fox becoming the associate head coach from the GM role. We'll also talk about some of the transfer targets for men's basketball, and then Chris Pierce and Alan George they signed on with a couple NFL teams, so we'll talk about that, and then we'll get to some of your recruiting notes per usual. The recruiting analyst, Mr. Will Byram, over here, so we'll get to that. But Will, it's May the 4th. I gotta ask you, are you a big Star Wars guy at all? I have seen them, but I'm not the kind of Star Wars geek that worships the entire series on this day like some people do.
I'm a Star Wars guy to an extent that anyone is a Star Wars guy that I think is our age. I mean, I watched them growing up. I've seen all the Star Wars movies. I watched the new one come out in theater, and I've got to say that you go back and watch them now, they don't quite have the same effect that they used to. And I think I watched them when I was 9 or 10 years old. But I'm not going to put any disrespect out into the Star Wars universe, especially on a day like today, Billy. So a little bit crazy of you to put some hate out there on May the 4th. So I'm taking the force back. I hope the force is not with you today.
Listen,
I'm also very white. I'm very, very white in this video, and I can't stop looking at it. I'm like reflective off the screen here.
We need a light to make you look a little bit more tan, and we need to figure that out.
I mean, I don't know what kind of light there's going to be. I mean, I am very white to begin with, and the low quality camera on my laptop here certainly just doesn't assist.
Not helping you out. I don't think our new white background is helping you out much at all either. So that's on me.
It's giving something for everybody to compare me to, which is just not ideal whatsoever.
I'll take the blame for that one, Will. I got you for that one. But yeah, Will, on May the 4th, I'm not a guy to wish May the 4th be with you to people, but I'll give the respect where it's due. May the 4th, and we also got Cinco de Mayo tomorrow, so quite the lead into the weekend. And Will, we've got some baseball to get into, and that's where we will start. And our first topic here, as we get, holy crap, I did this wrong. We still got to get to our intro here before we get to breaking news. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Dore_report and Instagram, Dore.report. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes. All right, let's now get to the breaking news.
There we go. It's only episode 161. You'll get it down. We'll get it down at some point. We get 161 more tries, maybe.
All right, well, let's get into it. And we start with the Vandy boys here. And the question you see at the bottom, is it time to panic? And I think Vandy fans are very upset, deservedly so. This team, especially in the last week, has not looked good at all. The bottom of the order has not hit the baseball well at all, and even the top of the lineup against the Louisville Cardinals, where they lost 1-0, they got 2 hit by, I think it was several Louisville pitchers. Louisville was sending a different guy out there every inning, it felt like, and Will, it was the entire lineup. It wasn't just the bottom of the lineup against Louisville; it was the entire lineup. And I'll answer this question, Will, by saying, yes, it's time to panic, but I would not rule out this team. Like I'm not gonna bank on it that because they may not make a regional this year. I think that's kind of the area we're getting to. I think they will. Like, I still think this team is making a regional. They may be a 3 seed. They may end up being a 2 seed. I doubt at this point, Will, they're going to be a 1 seed. They're going to be a host. I doubt that. But Will, yes, it's time to panic. But we've seen this time and time again. We saw it in 2018 where the team, quite frankly, didn't look great at times and didn't look good at all at times in the regular season. But they find a way to flip the switch. And I will say, Will, that the numbers are on this team's side. Like this team is top 5 in the SEC offensively in batting average, which is crazy to think about. They're top 5 in ERA. So, we talk about numbers all the time, and you can say numbers don't lie. But as much as it's time to panic, I still think that, of course, baseball, different than basketball, different than football. There's a lot left to play. But yes, to answer the question, it is time to panic. We've got 3 more SEC series to go. I think they've got 3 more non-conference games left, and those will all be winnable games. Hopefully, boost their RPI up a little bit. But Will, I think you agree with me here. It is time to panic, and it seems like Vandy fans are all in agreement there. I think that's kind of the consensus right now.
It depends, and I posed the question. I said it as time to panic, so I did lead myself in to say this answer. So here we go. But it depends on how you would define panic, and it depends on, are you saying that the program's in a bad state and you see the future of the program maybe in jeopardy, and you're panicking that this is a team unlike any Vanderbilt team that we've seen before and things seem to be slipping? That would be one side of panic, and then there's the short-term panic of, is this team going to be able to turn it on and make the run late in the season like we've seen in the past? And in the long-term panic, absolutely not. I don't think that either me nor you see this as a team that doesn't have potential to improve next year and get back into that status of being a true national contender, even though you tweeted out from the Dore Report account on Twitter there that Vanderbilt was still plus 1,500. I think they were still top
it's crazy.
5 in national title odds. But those
might
not be updated. The most consistently are the best, but not as much money flowing into NCAA baseball as other sports to correct those futures.
That might be altered a little bit, but like what you just said, they simply how much money is actually filtered into it. But I think I do think there's some merit to that. Like Texas is up there, and I know some people were commenting about it and saying, why is Texas up there? Why is Vandy even up there? And things of that nature. But the way they're playing right now, Will, it's almost like you could have an argument that this isn't even a tournament team right now. Am I in the wrong there? Like, yes, there's a lot to play, but you've got Georgia on the road. You've got Arkansas on the road, a top 5 team, and then you welcome in LSU, another top 25 team. So if this team doesn't get their act together, they're in for a rude awakening, and they legitimately might not make the tournament. Like that, I think that's where we're at right now. I think they will. But that is out there. That thought is out there. Like if they beat, I think if they take 2 out of 3 from Georgia, that's a great sign. I think they can still lose. Yeah, big huge if. But then you go on the road to Arkansas, an incredible atmosphere. If they take 1 out of that one, I think they're still alive. And then you got LSU at home. And it's tough to see this team the way they're playing to even make this run, but they've done it before, and they've played well before. Like I'm going to keep saying this team is not playing up to their ability, and I think you would agree, Will. But they haven't shown us a ton recently, so that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm kind of indecisive. I still am, because it's been a roller coaster of a season.
I'm just not going to be able to take as decisive of a stance as I would like to on Vandy baseball, because there's always the possibility that this team with Tim Corbin at the helm and the pedigree and the prestige that the Vandy boys program has, that they could turn it on and make a run. But the short-term panic, I think that we are way past the point, and Vandy fans should be way past the point of panicking in the short term of this season being a national title contender. And you said that stats don't lie, and you quoted off batting average, and I'm a huge stats guy. I go into stats, and there's always stats to explain what you're seeing every single time. And if the stats don't explain what you're seeing, you're looking at the wrong stats, or you haven't looked at the detailed enough stats. And you can see that there's one stat in particular, and I'm going to tease it, so I'm going to run through some more stats beforehand, but there's one stat in particular that is the reason that Vanderbilt's not winning games. And it's not batting average, it's not ERA. Vanderbilt's 4th in the country right now in ERA with a 3.1. They are also 2nd in the SEC in ERA, only behind Tennessee. They are, I believe, top 50 in the country in walks per 9 innings. So they are also not allowing a lot of batters on base, which is leading to that earned run percentage. So you can mark out right there, pitching is not the problem. So all the criticisms following Kumar Rocker, following Jack Leiter, they've done a hell of a job, even with the struggles of finding a consistent starter rotation and a real healthy bullpen rotation. The stats bear out that pitching is not why they're losing, and that Louisville game is the perfect example of that. And you also look at batting average and you say they're putting the bat on the ball about where you would expect a team to win more games. I think they're sitting about 80th in the country or
Yeah.
so in batting average, but you're playing in the SEC and the batting averages in the SEC are just lower because the pitching is just so much better. I think it's 3, 4, 5 of the top 10 ERAs
Yeah.
in the country or somewhere around there, even facing the batting in the SEC, are from the same conference. But the one stat that is the reason this team is not winning games is they're getting on base and they're not hitting with power. They have no power in this lineup.
And I'll say
Right
this
now they're
too: runners in
go
scoring
ahead.
position. It's awful.
Mhm.
I don't have the stat in front of me, Will, but twice in the Louisville game, they left the bases loaded and didn't get anything, nothing. And yes, I think a lot of those the bases were loaded because they got walked, but I mean that has to change. I don't know if you have the stat, Will. I don't have it in front of me, but I would love to know what that runners in scoring position stat is. Aria Gerson's done a great job with a lot of her tweets with all these stats. She has some kind of, I don't know if it's a software or what, but she gets stats kind of just thrown her way, and she's able to kind of feed them out to Vandy fans. So she's done a great job. I think her Twitter is a great resource for that. But I mean, it's runners in scoring position that they just, when they get runners
in
on,
scoring position, but it's just power. I mean, it's just
It's
power. You're eating it's
they
Tim
don't hit with
Corbin's teams
power.
have never, he's always been a small ball guy. They've never been known for teams hitting with power. I think that 2014 team had like under 50 home runs. That could be completely incorrect, but under 50 home runs the entire season.
Other than
This
maybe
team,
2019 also. That was a
yeah,
decent power hitting team.
that's
But
what I'm
other than
getting.
that,
That's what I'm getting at. But the team that won in 2019 in modern college baseball, they hit in 2019 100 home runs. Okay, the batting average this year compared to last year is actually up. They're actually hitting a better average than they were last season.
that's
The
crazy.
difference is one thing. It's home runs and hitting with power. They're actually second in the SEC in triples. So it's not triples, but their total bases. They are 10th in the SEC in total bases. And they are 10th in home runs with just 49. That's just not going to get it done. They're leaving guys stranded. They don't have the pop in the bats this year. And that's not something, as we know from watching the College World Series over and over and over, that gets better in Omaha. You don't start suddenly hitting the ball out of that ballpark there. If anything, it goes the opposite direction. Typically, teams that hit with power don't have great success in Omaha. And that is the exact reason that Tim Corbin, with the perspective of winning national championships, making it to Omaha, playing there and having success, doesn't build his teams around power. But in modern college baseball, with the pop that these teams have that they are playing and the conference that they're playing and the quality of pitching, the quality of fielding, the quality of play, you have to have dudes that can just hit the ball out of the ballpark and get those ducks around the pond, move them home. You've got to push the runs across the plate. The small ball is great once you get into that postseason play, but you have to have enough power to get there.
And
this
and
season,
you've got to have runners on.
yeah, and this well, they're hitting with average. They're getting guys on. They're just not pushing them home, and that's not something that I think is fixable. You have Spencer Jones hitting well, but there's just the bottom of that order is just not improving. If anything, they're getting worse throughout the season, Billy. So I'm pressing the panic button on this season. I'm not pressing the panic button on the future and future seasons because I think they do have a good base there with that pitching staff and some good young talent there. On the offensive side of the ball as well, that I think can develop some of the power that you're looking for in either next season or the season after.
Yeah. Well, I will also press the panic button, but I will say it with the big caveat of this team is in final exam week right now, and they've also last week they've been studying for all these writing papers. I'm not saying that as an excuse. Every school has that, but when you're at Vanderbilt, that's. I mean, I heard Jack Bolger had 3 exams on I think it was the day of the Louisville game, so I couldn't imagine trying to focus on 3 exams and then you got to go play a baseball game. So that's playing into it. So I think with the caveat of exams will be over. And these guys will very soon, be able to just focus on baseball. And I'm excited to see that, but we haven't seen it. Like, that's the thing. We haven't seen it yet. So we got to see it, I think, for a lot of Vandy fans to believe it. And they're getting restless for good reason. And but they've got a chance this weekend down in Athens, Georgia. And we'll talk of that. We'll talk about that series more with Rhett Wiseman. He will join here in about 30 minutes live here on Twitter and YouTube. But yeah, so that's where we're at with baseball. We've got a lot of other stuff to get to. I don't know if you haven't had anything else on baseball, but it's go time. It's that's what I'll say. It is go time for these guys, and if they don't,
We're a few series past go time. We're a few series past. I mean, we kept saying, and me and you on these episodes, and you can go back weeks and weeks of saying we've given the benefit of the doubt, and we've given okay, it's time to turn it on. It's time. This is a big series, and at times this is why they're so frustrating. Is you see it, you see the flashes of what this team can be when they do hit with power and can consistently string together extra base hits, but it's just the offensive consistency. And teams that aren't consistent on offense are the ones that will drive you absolutely insane. When the final stats don't bear out your truly bottom of the barrel on offense, that's when it's brutal because it's like an inconsistent shooting team. It's what we've watched in basketball. But at least in most statistical categories, they've been at the bottom. They've been that bad. And you're kind of used to seeing that, but they were streaky. And streaky teams in baseball are just as frustrating, to me at least, as streaky teams in basketball. Maybe not quite as much, but up there. And it's frustrating to see because you just see flashes and they just come and go. And just this team in the long-term run that is going to be postseason play and is postseason play in NCAA baseball, man, I don't want to rule out Tim Corbin. I don't want to rule out the Vanderbilt baseball program, but it's hard to see a path where this team is able to actually string together wins and put out consistent offensive performances.
Yeah, I mean, with what we've seen right now, it is definitely hard to see that. The pitching hasn't been the problem, like what you said, Will. Devin Futrell, he was 8-0 before the Louisville game. He had his first loss against Louisville. He went 6 innings. He only allowed 1 earned run in his first loss of the season.
First loss.
Yeah, but on the offensive side, Will, they struck out 14 times, and that's a rivalry game. That game means a lot. That if they were to win that one, that would have meant a lot for their RPI. But now on the other side of it, that means a lot for Louisville. So we will have to see. Will, the big series coming up this weekend. I feel like we're saying that every week, and I mean, really, literally from here on out. I mean, this week. It just feels like they have to win it. I mean,
it just feels like baseball is just different because the focus on it in the SEC, and I know we have other stuff that we want to move to, but it's baseball and basketball both move to the same way that football is, which is mediocrity doesn't exist. If you're mediocre, you're bad in the SEC, and that's what it feels. Is this Vandy team's not even mediocre? This is probably what most teams and most baseball programs would look at and say is an up year. You're sitting in the SEC top 5 in most statistical categories, but to Vanderbilt, this is just a above average in the conference, I would say, team right now. And mediocrity or anything close to that is just bad. It's the same thing. This Vanderbilt basketball team in the last 2 years, in previous SEC basketball overall talent level, would not have had the records that they've had, and they probably would have been a tournament team. They would definitely not have been playing consistently in that opening night or teetering on that opening night game. And that's where I'm sitting concerned with baseball, is not for the overall state, but these teams that in the past with Tim Corbin, you would have said, okay, they're still leading the pack in the SEC. They're still close to being a super region or a regional host site. They're still probably going to be able to string together a lot of wins in the SEC tournament. These teams that are slightly above average are just good. It just doesn't cut it anymore. And you're having the conversation that me and you are having. So I don't think that this team's talent level is below where Vanderbilt's been previously. It's just if the rest of it's caught up to them in the conference specifically. So there's just not as much room for error. And they're still going to be able to elevate above where they're at. And they're still going to make the national title runs. It's just the good to above average teams just aren't going to be competing and winning SEC titles the same way, or at least on that level of top 1, 2, 3 teams in the standings. That's just not going to happen anymore. Yeah. So it's kind of a slap in the face of reality here with baseball that you're still king dog, you're still king sitting on the mountain, but they're slowly inching towards you. And Tim Corbin's got to protect the throne. And so next year is a huge year for Vanderbilt baseball. And I'm not wanting to look past this year, but I keep saying it's hard to see the path of this team really having a result by the end of the year that we see as successful.
Yeah, it's been a weird year too, Will, because yes, Vandy's down, but they're not even as down as Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Like those two teams may not even make the SEC tournament. So it is crazy to see kind of the level of like, okay, Vandy's down, but those other teams are down, and Vandy's down is different than an Ole Miss or Mississippi State. So
Well, it's like
we
Bama
got
going 10-2 or 9-3 is a bad football season, or Kentucky basketball being an 8 seed is a huge disappointment. I mean, that's the same level that Vanderbilt baseball is on. So that's a good thing. That's a spoil of it. That's not the worst thing in the world with the state of the other programs and where they normally
little
finish.
positive touch, as tough as it is to say positive that right now. But yeah, so Vandy and Georgia this weekend. That'll be a 3-game series starting on Friday. All 3 games will be on the SEC Network Plus channel, and we'll be looking forward to it. Big series. Well, let's move on to some basketball news, and we'll start with Andy Fox being promoted to the associate head coach role. And he was previously, the general manager, obviously the same role as Barton Simmons for the football team. He's entering his 4th season on the staff. He spent his first 2 years as the director of scouting and recruiting before serving as the GM last year. And, I heard some rumors about potentially a guy like Konzo Martin maybe joining Stackhouse's staff. I don't know if that's still going on, but what could have just happened is Andy Fox might have taken that role. Who knows? I don't know how many spots if there's spots still open on the coaching staff, but Andy Fox has been promoted to the associate head coach. And I don't know a whole lot about this guy, but he has seemed to do some good things, especially in the GM role. I'm sure he's done a lot of recruiting. And I think, again, staying in-house, sometimes that can be perceived as a bad thing, but I think with this basketball staff, I think it's a good thing because you're starting to see a little bit of continuity. Just a little bit, because Stackhouse brought in a couple new assistant coaches. I think they did a great job, and they helped Stackhouse out a lot. And I think this is just another sign of, there's a little bit of continuity, I think. So Andy Fox promoted to associate head coach. Will, I'm not sure how much you know about him, but congrats to him because, that's a step up. That's for a college basketball assistant coach. You're now the associate head coach as opposed to a recruiting coordinator. Then you got the GM bump, and now you're the associate head coach. So, Andy Fox, congrats to him.
Whatever. He's replacing Ed Conroy. It's assistant coaches in basketball are super overrated, and it's just seeing them, they're so replaceable compared to every other sport. And there's one reason is there are very few guys on the actual team in basketball. The head coach can have personal relationships with every single group of positions. There's only 5 total positions, and really in practice you split up in 2. You split up in guards and posts. The coach can work with both. It's a little bit different than when you split up in football and you have offensive, defense, and then you switch up with offensive line, defensive line, secondary, receivers, running backs, quarterbacks. The coach can't be as hands-on. And so basketball, most of the time, these assistants are just there to help recruit. Ed Conroy was there for one reason, Liam Robbins, and then to jump up to a head coaching role. They're so temporary. There's so much fluctuation. And congratulations to Andy Fox. He's been there since year 1 with Jerry Stackhouse, but this doesn't really change anything. Ed Conroy was gone. He was meant to be replaced by somebody, and obviously Stackhouse was happy to go internally. And since there's not much recruiting to be done at this point, it's just kind of a a side note here. I'm not trying to demean it, but it's a slow news cycle right now, and this gets noted.
This gets noted in the slow news
internal
cycle.
Staff movement for the basketball program.
Yeah, but yeah, Will, as you mentioned Ed Conroy, I had totally forgotten that he went over to the Citadel, so to be their head coach. I think he played there. Yep. Yeah, he played at the Citadel. So, some fluctuation here with the Vanderbilt men's basketball staff, but Andy Fox is now the associate head coach, and we'll see potentially maybe another guy is brought in by Stack. We'll keep tabs on that. But Will, we also have. I don't know if this is transfer news. I think you put this in the script of transfer targets. And Will, we talked about it last time of the one spot that is seemingly still open. I haven't heard a ton on the transfer target and whether Stackhouse will be dipping into the transfer portal. But there is still a spot available technically. And I know we touched on this last time, but I think it would be notable if Vanderbilt were to bring in another guy, whether it's, it obviously wouldn't be notable if it's a walk-on, of course, but I think Vanderbilt could use all the depth they need and they could use. But right now, Will, I mean, they've got 7 guards, 7 forwards. I don't know if they need another guy, but I'm sure Stackhouse will take another guy. So I'm not sure if you have news on that aspect of it with another target potentially coming in. But that's kind of where this team is at, and there is a spot still available. So again, I haven't heard much, but I wasn't sure if you had heard anything on that side of things. Again, slow news cycle, man. This is where we're at.
Just reading 24/7 and constantly checking the little crystal ball and the latest news. There was one name, and then of course I searched it within 24/7 and guessed you'd already said something about it and had something written about it. Was Robbie. Old Robbie's
Robbie,
always on top of it. And the
always.
name, and I'm going to butcher it. Okay, and this is a hell of a name. Is Weber State guard Sikiu Sissoko Jawara. And it's a hell of a name. He's from Spain, 6'3", 210 guard. He shot over 40% from three the last 2 seasons, and he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. So I think he was a two-time All Big Sky player, currently at Weber State, like I mentioned. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. I mean, there's a ton. I think I've read like 5 or 10 names. I don't know how much credence is to any of them. But that was a name of somebody that I think fit what Vanderbilt's looking for specifically, and that's a
Did you
shooter.
say he's a shooter?
Yeah, he's not an incredible scorer, but he is a consistent shooter from the outside. Like I said, shot over 40% from three the last 2 seasons. So that's the headline on him. Now,
I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
a
even
hell
gonna
of a
try to
name,
pronounce
man.
that name.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging 12 points a game, two and a half rebounds, 3 assists a game. He's a 2 guard, so he's not a point guard. This team, it really, outside of Noah Shelby, and he's coming in as a true freshman. How true of a point guard do they really have on the whole roster? And
That's a good
a
question.
huge question mark going into the season, and we just keep waiting, and it just keeps happening. And you had some guys transfer in, but I mean, we'll see who can pan out. Rodney Chapman would be a hell of a guy to have right now. That's somebody that was undervalued this season that you would definitely appreciate having now that SPJ is gone, and would probably be the guy that would be the primary ball handler most of the time.
Yeah. We're Vandy fans are going to miss Scottie Pippen Jr., but they're going to really miss Rodney Chapman as well, because I mean,
when he was
really
on the court, you felt the difference. Like you felt the team was running their offense for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it was an obvious difference. It's crazy how that, like in basketball, one guy can do that. Like, especially a veteran like that who's played a ton of basketball. So as much as Vandy fans will miss Pippen, and they will, but they'll also miss Chapman. But you've also got guys coming in. We talked about the leaps. They're going to have to take the leaps. So that's of course, those are both kind of reaches there on the basketball side. But we had to give the basketball team a little bit of love.
Well, all in all, Billy, I think we keep doing it and we keep saying it. But I just want to keep hammering home the fact that it's great, and Jordan Wright and Miles Studi are going to be key factors in this men's basketball team next season. This whole team comes down to Lee Dort, Noah Shelby, and Colin Smith, because they're going to get an opportunity, and they are going to be the focus of that offense. I don't care what Jerry Stackhouse says. I do not care what the assistant head coaches say. When that season starts and that opening tip is there, 2 or 3 of those guys will be 2 or 3 of the main players on the offensive side of the ball, and it just has to be that way. So you're relying on these guys. These guys are different. This is the first time that you've seen this since Darius Garland, Semi Shittu, and Aaron Nesmith. We keep talking about the progression, these guys taking a step up. That's great. But if Noah Shelby, Colin Smith, and Lee Dort, 2 of those 3 guys have to average double digits, or this team's going to be last place in the SEC. And even with 2 of those guys averaging just double digits, they might still be last place in the SEC. They have returning talent in Liam Robbins and QMB, but QMB is not going to score more than 8 points per game on average. And Liam Robbins, certainly, you're not going to run the entire team through Liam Robbins in modern college basketball. You have to have guard scoring and shooting, and that's going to come from Colin Smith and Noah Shelby. And then Lee Dort at that 4 and 5 position. I'm telling you, he's different. He's a freak. He's Sheboy. This is a guy that has potential to be that level of dominant. So we keep talking about the current roster and the transfers in, but it really comes down to the 3 guys we've been talking about for a year And that's the three guys coming in alongside Malik Dia, who's more of a project in that 4-man recruiting class.
I know you are too, but I am so interested to see the development of Shelby, Dort, Smith, because those are three guys, like you just said, they can step in and really, really make a difference. And it's going to be
This
fun.
team
It's going to
could
be
be
fun.
awesome next year. Like we keep kind of playing
There's
it
the
down because
potential there.
this team could be leaps and bounds better than they were with Scottie Pippen Jr. last season. Very good. I would honestly put it at 50-50 right now. Shot that this team is going to be better this season. Probably 60-40, even without Scottie Pippen Jr. Because I think for a while it was the team had like one win or no wins when Scottie scored over 30 points because he was great and that's awesome. But guys stood and watched a lot with him. And Scottie Pippen Jr. was not consistent enough on the offensive side of the ball and was a little bit too turnover prone to have guys sit there and watch him play Superman. And it was awesome to see when it was working, but there were a lot of times when he was cold and the team just looked like they were floundering. So I'm hoping that these freshmen will come in and bring not just scoring from the individual guys, but just bring a little bit of consistency and just spread out the scoring. Because I think you were just looking at three guys, really. You were looking at number one, Scottie Pippen Jr. to come out and put up 30. If that didn't happen, you were looking at Miles Studi to knock down 7 or 8 threes or whatever. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. And then if he was missing, you were looking at Jordan Wright to be hitting. And if one of those three things didn't easily happen early in the game, the team was lost. And so this year they have a lot more options. They have a lot more question marks, but that also leads to guys not being able to sit there and just be comfortable in their role of being pretty stagnant on offense. So it'll be exciting to watch. I do think at times that having that guy that is so clearly head and shoulders above anyone else on the roster can be a detriment. And I think Vanderbilt felt that at times. And I don't want to take away from what Scottie Pippen Jr. did because he carried that team a lot of the time. And that had to happen. But how much of that hampered the development of the offensive games of the other players and didn't allow them to do what they wanted to do. So we'll see a lot more of that next year because you really don't have anyone that I would say you would point to 100% and say that guy's our go-to scorer. Maybe Jordan Wright, but Colin Smith and Noah Shelby and Lee Dort, that's a lot of talent coming in as true freshmen.
Yeah, they're going to have something to say about it. They're going to have something to say about that, and we'll see what their roles are. But, I'll say this before we go on to football. For the first time in a long time, this program has momentum that was carried over into the offseason with the postseason NIT run, if you could call it that. But there's momentum. I mean, for the first time in a long time, 3-4 years. So that's there. That's another factor there. So we'll continue to keep an eye on kind of the development of those guys. But, let's move on to football. Not a ton of football to get to, and it obviously wasn't a very busy NFL draft for Vanderbilt, but a few Commodores did find a spot on NFL teams over the weekend. We'll start with Alan George. He officially signed an undrafted free agent contract at first with the New York Jets, we thought, and then I think it was a day later or the next day, he tweeted out he's now signing with the Bengals. So Alan George is a Cincinnati Bengal. Again, we'll have to see if he makes the roster, of course. But again, he's a guy that played 4 years at Vandy. He's, of course, from the state of Alabama. Wasn't a very highly recruited guy, but he did have 25 tackles, 19 solo tackles this past season, 141 total tackles over his career. And so, Alan George, he's going to get a shot. And I'm not going to say I'm totally surprised, but I was definitely surprised to see two guys. I mean, obviously, of course, we knew they weren't going to get drafted, but I think that tells you a little bit about, okay, they did have a tiny bit of talent on this team. And, again, we'll see what these guys are able to do. But you also had Chris Pierce. Well, Chris Pierce signed a free agent contract with the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday, played 5 years at Vanderbilt. It's crazy seeing that. 5 years at Vanderbilt, of course, tumultuous career on West End. 6'4" target. He was, I don't know if he was dominant, you could say, on the offensive side. He was dominant at times last season, over the last couple years. Yeah, in stretches.
How much of him, and that's the part that I wanted to say about Chris Pierce, was how much of him was the quarterback throwing in the ball and how much of him was him. Because I think that there are quarterbacks in the past, in Kyle Shermer, who comes to mind immediately, that Chris Pierce would have put up much better numbers than he did with the quarterbacks that he had. He never had a consistent quarterback throwing him the ball his entire career.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that I think a team could land, and I believe he's with the Cardinals, is who he signed with, and that's a pretty crowded receiving room that they have there.
DeAndre Hopkins.
And they've made some moves in the offseason. I don't want to go into my knowledge of the Arizona Cardinals receiving core live on air, but
I know they've got Rondale Moore. They've got
they have a lot of talent
Moore as well. Yeah, they've got talent
deep.
there. And so it might be tough. It might be tough for him, but I think he's got the body.
He is the potential.
He's got everything he needs.
Potential because he's never had a guy. You don't know. He could be a dominant force. You've never had a guy that can even allow him the opportunity to be a dominant force. It's why Bill Belichick targets and why the Patriots have so consistently gone after small school guys and undervalued guys at different position groups. It is the Patriots do that because they know that all the NFL teams are fighting for the same piece of the pie in the draft. And they're all fighting for the blue bloods that are proven out in SEC play with NFL talent surrounding them. They're proven out they can do it consistently. And those guys a lot of times don't work out and they don't have a hit rate. But there's a smaller piece of the pie that there are a lot of good players that are on bad teams. And Vanderbilt has been an example of that the last 5 years. There have been guys on that roster that can play in the NFL. And if you plug them in, there's not been a lot. And we've complained about it consistently, but Andre Mintz is a great example of that. Andre Mintz was on some good teams, but he wasn't on SEC championship level competing teams playing surrounded by tons of NFL talent consistently winning. But he's found a spot, and he has found a spot on the Broncos roster. He's signed, I believe, another deal, an extension. And he's an example of a guy that was undervalued in college and has actually been able to carve out a role. And I think Chris Pierce, with his body type, is going to be able to do that. Now, the question is, will they try to convert him to a tight end? Because that was the question about Chris Pierce, is he doesn't have great speed, but he only needs to put on like 25 pounds to become a legit tight end.
They listed him as a tight end as his position.
Okay, so he is moving into the tight end role.
And I say they as in I saw it on like the Cardinals tweet where they listed their group of free agent signees, and they listed him as a tight end. So we'll have to see. But am I mistaken here in saying Trent Sherfield is on the Cardinals? So Trent Sherfield on the Cardinals, Chris Pierce.
I completely did not connect those two things. So,
I didn't connect it either, but I think similar to Sherfield, I think Chris Pierce, I'm not going to say he's going to have the type of production that Sherfield has had, but I think he's got that potential. I think he could do the same thing Sherfield does and is doing with the Cardinals as their number 3-4 guy. I think maybe he's fifth. And
remember, David Rye was the receivers coach on the Cardinals as well.
Coached Larry Fitzgerald building.
It's little things like that right now are nothing, and they're not significant, and they're nothing. But in the future, you can look to that and point to that and say, look at the tentacles you have forming and growing, and you have assistant coaches that were formerly with these teams, and they put in a call and they can get you over there, and you're an undrafted guy on the French. That's where Vanderbilt can be, and that's the beginning of it. And right now, people would make fun of it if you said that, oh, you had 2 undrafted guys go into the league, whatever. But just building the consistent presence in the professionals, and basketball starting to do it just a little bit. Not this year in the postseason. Garland unfortunately knocked out in the play-in tournament.
Hey, you still got Neesmith and Cornette, baby.
To do it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Aaron Neesmith and Cornette on my Celtics. They
not a whole lot of playing time, but
3.
That's okay.
You know, they played some mop-up minutes every now and then on the court at the same time. But it's funny that
love seeing the
it's not just
celebrations
those
on the
two,
bench.
though. They also have Grant Williams who's playing. Somehow the Celtics
a little bit more
have 12 guys on that roster, or whatever they dress, 12 or 15, and 3 of them are from the state of Tennessee, which is crazy because there's no connection to Boston. I don't understand. The odds of that have to be crazy with Grant Williams and Luke Cornette and Neesmith.
It's like the one time Vandy football had 5 former the Bears had 5 former Vandy players
exactly.
at one time.
Yeah, it's like if the Titans have like 2 or 3 or 5, 6 local players from Vanderbilt and Tennessee, you're like, okay, there's a connection, but what the hell's the connection to Boston?
Yeah.
And the Celtics to have those guys. But
I do like what you said, though, about in terms of Clerkley's footprint and imprint in the NFL. I think you got to say this is a start, because maybe they don't pan out, but say Chris Pierce makes the roster and ends up playing on Sundays, another guy. That'll be Clark Lee's first guy. Maybe the same thing happens with Alan George getting a spot.
And I
So
mean,
I like that.
it's
That's a
also,
good
I was
point
watching
made
from the
there.
perspective of Clark Lee being at Notre Dame, like having Kyle Hamilton taken in the first round. I mean, that was a Clark Lee guy, and that's a guy
he
he
tweeted about
basically
it. Yeah.
developed. So that's what he can also point to. It's not just, hey, look what I've done with these guys, whatever happens after next season, or if these guys end up panning out, look what we were able to do here. But also look at the work that I've done, putting guys into the NFL at Notre Dame. Granted, Vanderbilt's a whole different beast as far as building up a program, because there's no program that needs to be built at Notre Dame. It's there. And so that's the beast of the project at Vanderbilt is, I think you could put it, it's going to take a special coach. And I don't know if it's Clark Lee. I certainly hope it is. I think he has the staying power to not jump schools, which is also the problem. Is I think James Franklin was the guy to build the program at Vanderbilt and turn it into
but he wasn't there to stay.
But he was not there to stay. So you have to find this perfect scenario of, I think Vanderbilt this time looked and said, okay, our number one is going to be, we want to find a guy that if he has success, not saying he will, but if he does, he's not just going to leave us for the next highest paying job. And I think that was number one in the back of their minds. What ended up being the final decision is, if you hire Healy or you hire Coastal Carolina's coach and they ended up having success after 5-6 years, they're gone. Vanderbilt's a stepping stone. I don't think that's the case for Clark Lee, but it's not just that. You have to have that. But then you can't just coach football at Vanderbilt, and you can't just recruit at Vanderbilt. That's the difference. Is Nick Saban can just coach and recruit and have his whiteboard with his assistants. That's it. He can coach and recruit. And Clark Lee has to coach and recruit, and he has to build brand recognition and change the perception and get these guys to even believe that it can be done. Like he has to not only like build up the talent and build a successful game plan, build a successful staff. He has to be involved in fundraising projects, because the university doesn't want to invest any money in athletics, even though they're making millions and millions of dollars off of SEC revenue checks. And so he has to be a part of that. And he has to be a part of just building a winning culture. And then he's a part of a logo change when they built the whole damn thing around the Star V and protect the Star V. That is still like, I mean, just the most bending over that the university could do to like any type of program that is trying to be built is, you have a coach that has had a brutal year one. And his entire thing is,
and then you do this.
The Star V is something to be proud of. And it's not just, there is history to it. There are people that have played and worn that Star V that have taken pride in it and been able to overcome things and do things that are unique and special at Vanderbilt and Star V. And he built the whole thing. They even posted a picture when it snowed in Nashville, like maybe not even a month before they announced that it protect the Star V with the snow shoveled off of it on the outdoor practice.
I love all the quote tweets that later came a couple of weeks ago.
It's just every single time that you try to build something, it's just they're working in opposite directions. So I'm hoping that this logo, which is why I've blasted it, but I've kind of laid off recently, is I'm hoping this will be one of the first things alongside the Vandy United actually announcing at least a soft expected completion date for these renovations to the basketball, or to adding in basketball facilities and adding onto and updating Dudley Field and Vanderbilt Stadium is, I don't know. I'm just hoping that's a move in the right direction consistently, because I hate it. And I don't think Clark Lee expected it to happen. And I don't think it was planned correctly. But it's like, it's happened. It's updated everywhere. And I know why they did it. I just don't agree with it. But at least I can kind of see a path. But now I feel like the football program is like, what is their identity currently? What's their recognizable identity right now? I think that's what they're lacking. Are they a program that puts guys into the NFL? Are they a program that goes in ebbs and cycles and plays tough defense? Are they going to be a spread offense? Are they a read option with a running court? Like, I don't know where their identity is. And I don't know if you see one developing right now as you flash across, letting me know it's time to move on.
Yeah, we're getting time.
I forgot that you have Rhett. You have Rhett coming up. We
Yeah,
won't even touch on recruiting
got
notes here.
yeah, we'll cancel those out of here. We'll hide those. But yeah, I'm with you. And I will say this though, I thought the V was going to look a lot worse on the helmets than
It
it
doesn't look
did.
bad. I want to add in two things before you go on Rhett with
All right, here we go.
recruiting. There is actual news besides us
Okay,
just
here we go.
talking.
Here we go.
Time just lost. They had a decommitment from Julian
Yes, I was
Randolph,
going to say that.
the tight end. He decommitted yesterday and was offered today by Miami. So connect the dots where you may there. That's super shocking. I would bet a little bit of money he will be a Miami Hurricane commit very, very soon. They also had a
really
pretty
blame him there.
Yeah, they had an interesting story. Duran Parrish, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
A wide receiver commit. I don't think he's actually rated out as a star on 24/7 Sports, but Robbie Weinstein, that's a great article on 24/7 Sports. Thank you, Robbie. Go check it out there.
Thanks,
but
Robbie.
talking about him being a lifelong Vanderbilt fan and this being like a dream come true. So those are the two little football recruiting notes I wanted to plug.
There we go.
You
I love it. Hey, thank you for doing that, Will. I meant to mention Julian Randolph, and now that he's maybe going to Miami, that's pretty notable.
Yeah,
and wouldn't be surprised.
He got stolen away. So that's always a good sign when your recruits are being targeted by, I don't want to say it, but higher profile prestige programs. I mean, that's a good sign. That means you're hitting on these 3 stars that are actually 4 stars. Because I'm always more impressed by the offer list than I am by any star rating, because the star rating doesn't put anything on the table, and you got to put your money where your mouth is with the scholarship offer. Well, kinda. I guess they can just take it away anytime they want.
I love the positive spin. I love it. And apparently NIL is being cracked down on. So we'll see. I don't know if there's going to be as much money being thrown around anymore. Of course, we've seen Tennessee, Texas, I think throwing upwards of $10 million at players. So it's the Wild West, Will. That's what
you know what they always say. Once you open up the floodgates, it's super easy to shut them again. That's what they always say, right?
Yeah.
Once you open up the can of worms, you just put them right back in. So that's what the NCAA is trying to do right now. And good F-wording luck, because we're live and I won't curse here, but good luck, NCAA. You've opened up the can of worms and done what you did, which I don't disagree with, but you should have known the consequences, and the fact that they're like just realizing what has happened and what's going to happen. It's the most NCAA move of all time that they didn't see that the most out of touch organization in the history of athletics, and they had no idea this was coming. Shocker. So NCAA.
The NCAA is going to need Noah's Ark to stop this flood. I mean,
I don't know
if there's anything.
There were guys already transferring out because they didn't feel their NIL money was good enough there. So that's opened the floodgates. I saw a tweet that was a real tweet from a real athlete entering the transfer portal. And there was a real article about it. And I don't remember the name. I wish I would have saved it. But once I saw that, it's over.
Well,
that's probably what led to the crackdown. But it's over.
It got ridiculous really quick. Like that escalated really, really quickly. So
I want to go pull my initial opinion on NIL, because I just said, like, you're going to do this and there's no going back. Like, there's too many loopholes once you open, because it was always the NCAA. You gotta see, Billy.
We got to go to Rhett Wiseman. My
this
bad.
Is why you can't schedule guests. We could just keep going, but you have bigger and better people to talk to than little old me.
No, that's not true at all. We'll have a big extravaganza, another late night. Probably not later this week, but definitely next week. We have plenty of time. We got the dog days still coming up, Will, but we got Rhett Wiseman. We got Rhett Wiseman coming up here on the Dore Report, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors.